Luciano had a vision to form a national crime syndicate in which the Italian, Jewish, and Irish gangs could pool their resources and turn organized crime into a lucrative business for all. In October 1929, 3 men forced Luciano into a limousine at gunpoint. He was beaten, stabbed, then strung up by his hands to a beam in a warehouse in Staten Island. Left for dead and forever marked with a scar and droopy eye, Luciano would survive this ordeal and become one of the most powerful figures in the criminal underworld. Today, we're taking a look at Salvatore Lucania, widely known as Lucky Luciano. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Past Crimes channel and leave us a comment below to let us know what other past crime stories you would like to hear about. On November 24, 1897, Salvatore Lucania was born in Lercara Fritti, Sicily, Italy. His father was adamant about eventually relocating to the United States, and when Luciano was 8 years old, the family left Sicily for America in April of that year. They made their home in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, a neighborhood in New York City that is well liked by Italian immigrants. At the age of 14, Luciano stopped attending school and began delivering hats for a wage of $7 per week. However, Luciano left his job and started making money on the streets after winning $244 in a dice game. His parents enrolled Luciano in the Brooklyn Truant School that same year. While still a teen, Luciano founded his own gang and belonged to the old 5 Points gang. For 10 cents a week, Luciano protected Jewish youth from Irish and Italian gangs, unlike other street gangs whose business was petty crime. Luciano first encountered Meyer Lansky, who was a teenager, when he tried to demand money from Lansky for protection while the two were walking home from school. The two developed a strong alliance because Luciano respected Lansky's resolute responses to his threats. Luciano was detained 25 times between 1916 and 1936 for offenses like robbery, blackmail, illegal gambling, and assault, but never went to prison. It's also unclear how Luciano was used in place of his last name. This might also have come about as a result of newspapers' repeated misspellings. By 1920, Luciano had come into contact with a number of future mafia figures, including Vito Genovese and Frank Costello. The same year, Luciano was chosen by Lower Manhattan gang leader Joe Masseria to be one of his mercenaries. Around that time, Luciano and his close friends began working for gambler Arnold the Brain Rothstein, who right away recognized the opportunity presented by Prohibition and taught Luciano how to operate a bootleg alcohol business. With help from Rothstein, Luciano, Costello, and Genovese launched their own bootlegging business. Luciano learned a lot from Rothstein and how to behave in high society. However, he was busted in a sting operation in 1923 selling heroin to undercover agents. Despite not serving any jail time, his reputation among his wealthy associates and clients suffered after he was revealed to be a drug dealer. Luciano then purchased 200 high-priced tickets for the Jack Dempsey vs. Luis Firpo boxing match in the Bronx and gave them out to influential gangsters and politicians in an effort to restore his reputation. Rothstein then took Luciano on a shopping excursion to Manhattan's Wanamaker's department store to purchase pretty expensive attire for the fight. The plan was successful, and Luciano's reputation was kept intact. By 1925, Luciano was operating illegal gambling and bootlegging operations in New York and Philadelphia that brought in over $12 million annually and provided him with a personal income of about $4 million. Luciano quickly rose to the position of top 8 in Joe Masseria's criminal enterprise. Unlike Rothstein, Masseria had poor manners, little managerial experience, and no formal education. By the late 1920s, Salvatore Maranzano, the boss who had come from Sicily to run the Castellammarese clan, was Masseria's main rival. Gaetano Reina, one of Masseria's lieutenants, sided with Maranzano, so Masseria gave Luciano the order to set up Reina's hit. The bloody Castellammarese War resulted from the rivalry between Masseria and Maranzano following the death of Reina on February 26, 1930. The alleged Old World Mafia principles of honor, tradition, respect, and dignity were upheld by Masseria and Maranzano. These bosses were wary of hiring non-Sicilians and refused to work with non-Italians. Only men with ties to their own Sicilian village were allowed to work for some of the most traditional bosses. As long as there was money to be made, Luciano was, in contrast, willing to work with gangsters who were not just Italian but also Jewish and Irish. When Luciano heard traditional Sicilian mafiosi criticizing him for his interactions with his close friend Costello, whom they referred to as the Dirty Calabrian, he was shocked. Luciano soon started forming relationships with other younger mobsters who were born in Italy but started their criminal careers in America and resented the conservatism of their bosses. In order to expand their gang enterprises into criminal empires, Luciano wished to apply the lessons he had learned from Rothstein. Future mob bosses like Costello, Genovese, Albert Anastasia, Joe Adonis, Joe Bonanno, Carlo Gambino, Joe Profaci, Tommy Gagliano, and Tommy Lucchese eventually joined this group as the war dragged on. They thought that their boss' conservatism and greed kept them in poverty while the Irish and Jewish gangs prospered. In May 1929, Luciano, Johnny Torrio, Lansky, and Costello hosted a conference in Atlantic City with the goal of creating a national crime syndicate that would allow the Italian, Jewish, and Irish gangs to pool their resources and make money off of organized crime. Masseria had been having trouble in the war, and Luciano saw a chance to change sides. In a covert agreement with Maranzano, Luciano consented to plan Masseria's demise in exchange for the rackets Masseria left behind and the opportunity to serve as Maranzano's second-in-command. When Masseria learned of Luciano's treachery, he approached Joe Adonis about killing Luciano because Adonis had joined the Masseria faction. Adonis, on the other hand, alerted Luciano to the murderous scheme. Masseria was killed on April 15, 1931, at Nuova Villa Tomaro, a Coney Island restaurant in Brooklyn. According to reports, Anastasia, Genovese, Adonis, and Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, along with other gunmen, burst into the restaurant as they were playing cards when Luciano allegedly excused himself to use the restroom. The Castellammarese War came to an end when Luciano took control of Masseria's gang and was appointed Maranzano's lieutenant with Maranzano's approval. After Masseria's death, Maranzano restructured the Italian-American gangs in New York City into 5 families, each of which was led by Luciano, Profaci, Gagliano, Vincent Mangano, and himself. Maranzano reduced the rackets of the competing families in favor of his own. Although Luciano seemed to agree with these modifications, he was merely buying time before deposing Maranzano. Luciano had come to the conclusion that Maranzano was even more avaricious and petty than Masseria. By September 1931, Maranzano had come to realize that Luciano posed a threat, so he hired Irish gangster Vincent Mad Dog Call to kill him. But Lucchese warned Luciano that his death was imminent. On September 10, Maranzano gave the order for Costello, Genovese, and Luciano to report to his Manhattan office in the Helmsley building. Luciano made the decision to act first because he believed Maranzano had intended to kill them. He sent 4 Jewish gangsters, whose faces Maranzano's people had never seen, to Maranzano's office. Lansky and Siegel's assistants had organized these men. 2 of the gangsters disarmed Maranzano's bodyguards while posing as federal agents. The other 2, with help from Lucchese, who was there to ID Maranzano, took out Maranzano. This hit served as the first in what would become known as the Night of the Sicilian Vespers. The bodies of 2 additional Maranzano allies, Samuel Monaco and Louis Russo, were found in Newark Bay a few days later, on September 13. The head of the Pittsburgh crime family, Joseph Siragusa, was fatally shot inside his residence. The October 15th disappearance of Joe Artisan, the head of the Los Angeles family, was regarded as an alleged scheme to swiftly overthrow the old-world Sicilian bosses. However, the notion of a planned mass purge under Luciano's direction has been disproved as a myth. Because he founded the commission in 1931 and eliminated Salvatore Maranzano's position as boss of bosses after the Castellammarese War, Luciano is regarded as the founder of modern organized crime in the United States. Lucky Luciano was also the first official boss of the modern Genovese crime family. By creating covert alliances with other bosses, Luciano made the decision to quietly maintain control through the commission. Luciano did not completely ignore Maranzano's changes, though. He considered the crime family's made-man ceremony to be a Sicilian anachronism. Luciano promoted his most dependable Italian associates to important positions within the newly formed Luciano crime family. Genovese was promoted to underboss, and Castello was made consigliere. As capo regimes, there were Adonis, Michael Coppola, Anthony Strollo, Willie Moretti, and Anthony Carfano. Lansky and Siegel couldn't hold official positions in any mafia family because neither man was Italian. However, Lansky served as Luciano's principal advisor, and Siegel was a trusted associate. Later in 1931, Luciano organized a meeting in Chicago with several bosses and suggested creating a commission to act as the governing body for organized crime. The commission has been described as Luciano's greatest invention because it was created to resolve all conflicts and determine which families controlled which regions. The commission served as a vehicle for Luciano to covertly maintain his control over all the families and avert further gang conflicts. The commission was put to the test for the first time in 1935 when Dutch Schultz was told to abandon his plans to kill Special Prosecutor Thomas E. Dewey. That's it for this video, and thank you for watching the story of Lucky Luciano and his rise to power.